call sign is with, and we do our best to try and answer them. So I'm going to post a link over here in the chat. Oops, no, I'm not. I need to grab that link again from up here higher in the chat.
Beat you to it.
I was going to post it over onto the YouTube and to other locations like that. Yeah, so that everybody is able to participate today. So if you're joining us on YouTube, hey, thanks a lot for joining us. Here is a link. It's cq.wavetalkers.com/coffee bar. And you should be able to submit a question, and we'll add it up there into the queue. We'll do our best. We'll work through as many as questions as we can in roughly about an hour or so. And then if you're here live in the Zoom room, hang around, and we'll do the after party, and we'll just continue working through those. Hey, if you ever want to join us during the after party, be sure to go to wavetalkers.com. Scroll down to the bottom of any page. There's a join us link. You can sign up for the mailing list. We send out only one message a week, and we send you the link to the live session here in the Zoom if you would like to join us there. So without further ado, let me go ahead and pull the guys down real quick. We'll do our quick check-in like we normally do. Move spotlight and remove that one. We'll jump over to the PC. Oh, actually, you know what? I guess I got to show you the question first. Goodness. You'd think I'd know what I'm doing here. So this week's question is, how has WinLink impacted your operating practice? What you want to do is send a standard WinLink check-in form. We'll walk through that process here in just a second. Send it to all three of our call signs: W0DHG, NR6V, W6AH, and our tactical address, WaveTalkers. Use the standard WinLink check-in form down in the comments section. Let us know, how has WinLink impacted your operating practice? So now let's jump over to the PC, and we'll walk through that process here together real quick. So here I've got WinLink open. I'm just going to come up to the toolbar and click on the new message window. It should spring open something that looks like this. We're going to come over here to select template. Go ahead and click on the template options. It should open up your template manager. Under standard templates, I'm currently running version 1.0.240. If you've got an older version than that, then you might want to run the update. Just go ahead and quit WinLink and launch it again. It'll run the update for you. Click the little plus next to standard templates. Come down here to general forms. And I saw somebody just before the show sent me a WinLink message and asked, where is the field situation report? So we'll take that as our first question. It's right here under general forms. There's that field situation report. But for sending your check-in, I digress. Come down here to WinLink check-in. Go ahead and click on that. Double click it. If the demo gods are with you, it should open up your web browser of choice. Here at the top, you want to click on date and time. That's going to set the current date and time. According to your computer, it'll set it to the current date and time. We'll click OK. And down here, this is where in the to field is where you want to put all of our call signs. W0DHG, put a semicolon. NR6V, another semicolon. W6AH, another semicolon, and our tactical address, WaveTalkers. If you want to see that you got the check-in form, you can put your own email, like your real-world email address. You can just add that to the end, and then you'll get a copy of the form that you submit into us as well. In the from, put your call sign, station name. That's just your handle. Any initial operators. Go ahead and list out any other operators that you have there with you. Session type. This is all pretty self-explanatory. This is an exercise. What service you're sending it in on, the band, and the session type. In your location, go ahead and fill that information out. Down here is the comment section. Here, I'll pull myself off screen so you can see that. There's the comment section. This is where you want to let us know how WinLink has impacted your operating practice. After you fill that out, hit the submit button. It should update the page with a little information, and a couple of pop-up windows will show up. You close the window when it goes blank. All that data should be here in the message. Post it to your outbox. Over here in the open session window, make sure you have the correct session for how you want to send this selected. I'm going to send mine via Telnet, and hit open session and hit the start button. And if the demo gods are with you, you should have a bunch of messages. Your messages should go out, and look at that. We have some check-ins coming in from all over the world. at the end of the show, we'll check back in and we'll map everybody so we can see where all of your check-ins have come in from. In the meantime, I'm going to jump back over here and we're going to just start walking through some of these questions that folks have. So again, if you have questions for us, you can submit your questions by pointing your web browser to cq.wavetalkers.com/coffee bar. It's a simple little form. Go ahead and fill that out. Send us what your questions are, and we will take them in the order in which they come in. So let's dive into the first question. This one comes from W5CYN. It says, recommended practice to locate HF RMS gateway that may be used in remote areas. Example, hiking or backpacking. I'm going to bring the guys up so we're all kind of on screen here at the same time as we walk through these, and we can take the various questions. So for me, what I found is the thing that I do to make sure that I find an HF gateway that I can operate when I'm out in a remote area is I first start off by making sure I test my HF setup using that antenna that I'm going to be using in that radio from my home QTH, from my home location. I'll set my radio up, I'll set the antenna up outside, and I'll start pinging some of the regular gateways that I can normally hit. One of the things that I like to really pay attention to when I'm doing that is what is the compass bearing to each of those different stations that I'm operating. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. Here, let me actually pull the guys down, and then we'll jump into them in just a second here. So I'm going to go back over to my PC, and I happen to have my ICOM 705 connected to my PC here. So let's say I was going to try and send some traffic via VARA HF. So I've got my click the drop down menu here. I'm going to go over to VARA HF, and I'm going to hit open session, and it should spring open VARA for me. Everything should come up, and every now and then you'll see these little pop-ups. You want to make sure the pop-up says need to update propagation estimates. Go ahead and update. Yeah, sure. Go ahead and update that. If it pops up, what that's doing is it's updating the propagation tables for your current location for where you're at to try and see where your station will likely be able to connect to. So this usually takes a few seconds. You always want to do this before you head out into the field, because then you have the most current propagation tables. Even if you're going to be a good distance away from your house, this is still a good idea to be able to do this. All right, so the propagation tables have updated. The next thing that I usually do is I come up here to channel selection. And if you haven't done it, you can hit the update via internet. There's another place to be able to do that right from here. And you want to go through and find the stations that you're going to try and connect to. So let's say I wanted to try and connect to KD6 LLB on 7108.750. Over here on the right, it tells me the bearing and the distance to this station. So this station's a little close to me, 126 degrees on the compass, and about 48 kilometers away. What I typically do when I'm operating and looking for HF stations that I can regularly hit, I'll actually look a couple of 100 kilometers out, maybe 300 to 500 or more. So I'm going to come down here to this station here, K6 SDR. That's a bearing of 325 and a distance of 509 kilometers. When I move my location, even if I'm somewhere kind of locally within the county that I live or within, say, 50 or 100 miles or so, the bearing to this location is not going to change all that much. So I know roughly where that other station is currently located. The further out you go with a station, so here's one that's 1,400 kilometers away. There's others that are 500 and 600 kilometers away. The further out you go with an HF station, the more likely the distance where you're going to be traveling within your own local area is going to generally be pretty similar as far as where you can try and point your antenna. And then it's really simple. You just take your compass, kind of open it. You can use the app on your phone to open up the compass app, figure out what the bearing is. If you've got a directional antenna, you're kind of pointing in that location. So that's one of the ways. Another way to be able to deal with HF when you're going out to another location is to, first of all, enter in the grid square of where you're going to be. So for instance, I'm going to close my this VARA HF station setup here. Oh, actually, there was one more piece of data I needed to share with you on that. Come back here into the VARA settings. Once you find the other the station that you want to connect to and you've selected it, make sure you add it to your favorites so you know where that station is. Your computer has already kind of saved it before you head out into the field. All right, so let me close that. The other key thing to do is before you go out into the field, go into the settings section here and go to the WinLink Express setup and change your grid square to be the grid square of roughly where you're going to be. It doesn't have to be exact, but as long as you're pretty close, then go ahead and update the propagation tables, because then the propagation tables will be updated based on the location where you're expecting to be, not necessarily in where you are right now. Then you have the updated information before you head out into the field. You can, of course, do all of this when you're out there because you can update via radio, but this is definitely the better way to go when you're trying to set that up. David, Dan, do you guys have any other suggestions for setting up, making sure you can hit an HF gateway before you go out? One of the nice things about HF is you're already working at such a distance that a few hundred miles is not going to make usually a big difference in what you can hit. Make sure you can just hit a gateway before you head out, and more than likely you'll be able to hit the same gateway. Any other thoughts from you guys?
I don't have anything to add.
No. Yeah, and the only thing I would add is, if you're able to have an internet connection where you are, just update the table and it'll give you an idea of, based on where you are. If you upgrade, if you have an internet connection, figure out your grid square, update the grid square, it'll know exactly where you are. Then go ahead and do an update for all of the paths. And then, again, trust the WinLink system to tell you what it thinks the best path will be. And, as we tell people, don't try one or two, try a whole bunch. If you don't succeed, just keep trying, because something should work.
Yeah. And that's actually another good point, is if you have your WinLink set up, you've reset the grid square for where you're expecting to be roughly. Then once you open up your connection mode, you can try the auto connect button. It's right here at the top of most of the sessions, whether it be a VARA, a packet, a Pactor setting. At the top of the connection window, there's that auto connect. And as long as you have the new grid square, or roughly where your new grid square is, and you've updated before you head out, it should work pretty well, and it should figure that out for you. All right, let me close that. We'll come back over to here and we'll jump over to the next question. This is going to be the standard format. We'll just keep tossing this screen up so that folks can make sure you've got the cq.wavetalkers.com/coffee bar. So the next question comes in, says, if you send a message to a gateway that is in a donut hole. So what do we mean by the donut hole? Or what does this person mean by the donut hole? The disaster area. There's no communication in that particular area. So if you send a message to a gateway that is in the donut hole, do you see something special that it's not connected to the internet? First part of the question. Great question, by the way. And then scenarios are that the message is for somebody else in the donut hole, or does it need to be forwarded to someone outside of the donut hole, outside of the area? So do you see something different or at all? Yes. And let's do I want to actually do a live demo of this. We talked about doing this a few weeks ago when we did just a discussion show, but we didn't walk through doing it live for everyone else. So I'm going to jump back over and I'm going to do a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to change out of my amateur station. I'm going to change over to my share station. And I do want to go to I want to bring up my gateway. So this is a great way to test your gateway. If you're running an HF gateway, Let me bring this over here and make this screen a bit bigger so that it's able to be seen.
Might be worth talking a little bit
Everyone.
too about while you're doing that, what the donut hole is when they talk about the donut hole.
Why don't you talk about that while I'm getting set up here?
So, in a disaster, and a lot of times when we're talking about this, we're talking about earthquakes. There, in an earthquake, there is the ground zero, the epicenter, and when that event occurs, if you think about a donut, there's a hole in the middle, and there's going to be an area, likely, depending on the size of course of the disaster, that there you have a loss of communications, and because you have a loss of communications, the USGS they ask people to do the do you feel it reports, whether we do it via amateur radio or we do it via the internet or what have you, if you're not an amateur radio operator. And what they see or what they predict is in those larger disasters where folks' home internet or the resources are down in a neighborhood that's directly affected, when they start getting reports right after an event, there was going to be this hole of data where my internet at home isn't working. And while I try to go fill out the did you feel it report, I realize I may not have power, I may not have internet, and I may not be able to report that did you feel it event. And the whole reason the USGS partnered with the WinLink development team and amateur radio is it gives them the ability to get reports out of this area where potentially there's no connectivity, allowing amateur radio operators to send a message outside of that, what they call the donut hole. So give them some information, some situational awareness about what's happening on the ground.
Perfect.
I tried hard.
9 Lima. Okay, so all right, so I'm all set now. All right, so here I have a standard WinLink message that I've got written. It's going to go to NR6V, W0DHG, W6AH, and the subject says, please send pizza. I'm going to need one large pizza, and it's coming from my name. I'm going to go ahead and post that over to the outbox. But before I send this message, I want to simulate the donut hole. And we're going to do that by coming over here to my HF gateway that I have set up here. And I'm going to come here to RMS relay. I'm going to go up here to the settings section. This is a great test, by the way, if you are running a gateway, to make sure that your gateway is operating as it should be. So under settings, I'm going to come down here to the operating mode and HF forwarding section. This is in RMS relay. I'm going to bring that up, and let me pull myself off a screen here for a second. And here's the operating mode. So right now, my station is set to hold for internet access, store messages until an internet connection is there. It's also set to operate as a node in a WinLink hybrid network. So what does that mean? So what that means is that when a message comes into my gateway, if there is no connection to the internet, it will store that message for a second. It will wait some amount of time, and then it will start attempting to reach out to other stations, other gateways that will that have an internet connection, and it will just keep trying those until it finds one that works, and then it will pass on the traffic along. And so that's exactly what we want to demonstrate here. And so that's the way my gateway is set up in normal operating mode. Down here in the lower left-hand corner, there is this little secret hidden checkbox here that says simulate internet outage. And what's kind of cool is I can check this box, and when I hit save, my gateway is still sitting here operating, except for I've just unplugged the internet from it. So the internet is no longer connected to my gateway here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back over here to my PC, or to my PC. And I've got my ICOM 705 connected to my PC, and I want to send this simple message that's sitting in my outbox. I'm going to send it via VARA HF to myself. and to my gateway. So I've opened up my session. I've got my gateway called up here, and I'm going to go ahead and let's see, where are we in the cycle? Yep, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and hit the start button. And so my 705 is trying to transmit. We switch back over to here. And oh, you know what? I gotta unplug the power from my thing. Hang on for a second.
Don't lose us, Chris.
Yeah. Sorry. Hang on. I had to unplug the power from I forget my little connector has issues when it tries to when I have power plugged in there. It doesn't like to talk properly. So we're still rotating around. Start. Let's see if it'll. There we go. Hang on, I've done messed up my connection to my radio because I've got my power plugged into my connection here. Give me 1 second. Let me close all of this and just power cycle the radio and start over with that. I did a test just before we did this session, so should work. All right. There we go. Okay, so my radio is connected. Let's see which. What are you looking at? You're looking at my gateway. Let me switch back over to the PC. So the connection is going out from the PC right now. It's doing the talking back and forth. And there we go. This is what happens if you're connecting to a station that's inside of the donut hole. There's no connection to the internet, and you get this little pop-up. Please confirm that you want to connect. So I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead and connect to this server, and it's going to go through and it's going to send that traffic. All right, I'm going to turn this off. I'm switching back over to the gateway now, so you can see the gateway. Turn that down. And so the traffic is being sent. You can see it being received by the gateway. Here you can see it going out of the PC. This is out of the client. So we've got it here. It's receiving the message. And there we go. So it's gone ahead and it's sent the message. Now we're just going to leave this sitting here, and we're just going to watch the gateway and see what happens. Because remember, the gateway is set right now so that there is no internet connection. It's currently sitting inside of the donut hole. And if the demo gods are with us in shortly, the gateway should just take over and say, oh, you know what? I have a message that's sitting here that I really need to send. So it should go ahead and do that. And we can see that there's a message here. If we come up on, where's my mouse? There it is. If we come up here to view, messages waiting to be sent. See, there's a message up here waiting to be sent, and there it goes. It's doing this all on its own. It's going to start up the HF forwarding session, and it's going to start reaching out to other stations. I'm going to move this off the screen a little bit. It's going to start reaching out to the next station, and it's going to do this first via Pactor. It's going to reach out to the next station that it knows it's got a decent connection to. Then it's going to switch over. If it'll try several of those, it may switch over and try one via Vara HF. And it should just reach out and make that connection. So and it will just continue to keep trying and trying and trying
So
until there it goes. It's
Chris,
got a connection.
So does it choose channels based on something you've entered, or is it using the propagation reports?
Yeah, so it's using a combination of the propagation reports to identify the next best station to be able to connect to at this particular time. It's also there's settings inside of RMS relay that you can say which frequencies to avoid, which frequencies to focus on, which gateways to avoid, which ones to focus on. Like, let's say, I know if this was on my amateur station, I know ORV W6BI has a station that's just on the other side of the hill from me, and I can't hit ORV station from my station because of the local terrain. There's no way I can make a connection to it. So in my amateur station, I would specifically exclude his gateway from having one to try in that location, but it's going through and it's sending that traffic now.
I
It's
got
just
the
having to
message.
You got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Awesome.
So the difference, Chris, between a hybrid HF gateway and a standard HF gateway is that in the hybrid, it will automatically try to forward that message to another HF gateway that does have internet.
Correct. Absolutely
Otherwise,
correct.
it's just store and forward when the internet returns.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, if we come up here, I'm going to go back to RMS relay here. I'm going to go back up to the operating mode and HF forwarding. Let me pull myself off screen so you're able to see this.
Actually got the message twice.
I might have, yeah.
With different IDs, you must have sent it
Okay.
twice.
Yeah, I might have sent it twice as I was practicing. So then hold for internet access. This is the way that most amateur stations are set up for the operating mode. And normally what would happen in this case is, let's say this gateway is inside of the donut hole and it's not operating as a node in a hybrid station. Usually you would have do not forward via HF. So if you're running a VHF, UHF station, you don't have HF capabilities, you would have this set to do not forward via HF. If you do have HF capabilities and you want to operate in this hybrid network mode, then you tick this box here and the HF forwarding. You need to make sure that one of these options down here is selected. So message forwarding protocols. So my station is allowed to forward via PACTOR, and it's allowed to forward via VARA. So it's allowed to do either one of those. And minutes to delay after internet is lost before radio network is operating. You can do some controls there. But I'm going to go ahead and uncheck the box, simulate internet outage. I'm going to turn that back off and hit save. And so now my gateway is back in normal operating mode at this point. This is a great way if you're a sysop for being able to test your gateway, making sure that everything is working properly, and it will go ahead and do all of those things. It's really pretty slick. So there's your little demo.
So Francina followed up with, where's the message stored when the recipient is also in the donut hole?
So where would the recipient be? Where would it be if it's doing that? So more than likely the message is going to go out. It's going to be, if the gateway you're connecting to is a hybrid gateway, it's running in this mode where it will allow for forwarding via HF. And by the way, if you have a gateway and you're running both packet or VARA FM, you're running a VHF UHF gateway, and you're running an HF gateway, and you have that option checked for actually, let me go back to I can go back to the gateway here real quick. Bring that up. So in order to run HF on a gateway, you're running RMS relay and you're running RMS tri mode. If you wanted to turn on a VARA FM gateway, do I have the software up here? Let's see, move out of the way. You would be using RMS Packet. RMS Packet is the application for transmitting on FM, VARA FM, VARA HF. And there's a checkbox here. where'd it go? Use RMS relay. This is in the site properties. So if you're running a packet station or a VAR FM station, and this is again on the gateway side, use RMS relay, and then all of your packet traffic will all go through relay as well. I'm going to hit cancel here because I'm not running it on this one. RMS relay then is the tool that no matter where the traffic comes in at, VHF, UHF, or HF, if there's no internet connection, and it's participating in a hybrid network, it's going to send that traffic out via HF. It'll go out like that. So let's say the person that you're trying to connect to is also inside of the donut hole. So what's going to happen to that traffic? Well, that traffic is going to go from you. It's going to go into the HF, into the gateway. The gateway, if it is participating as a hybrid network, it's going to send that traffic out via HF to another gateway. So it's going to get it out into what's called the CMS, the common message server. And that message is then going to wheel its way through the internet, and it's going to be waiting there ready for that other person to pick up. So let's say the other person inside of the gateway is able to make a VHF connection to your hybrid gateway. Well, it would make the VHF connection to the hybrid gateway. The hybrid gateway would then say, hey, let me check and see if you have any messages. And it would call out, figure out if there's any messages for you, find those messages, pull it back, and deliver the message. So you can get that message inside of the donut hole, provided that you're working with a station that you're working with a gateway that's working in the hybrid network. Now, other ways to be able to figure that out, you can, first of all, let's say you can't reach the hybrid gateway directly. Well, and how would you know? How do you know which are the hybrid gateways? Well, first of all, you're going to look this up before you head out into the field. You don't want to do this kind of stuff when you're just out there. Let me go back over to my PC and see if I can get Windows to wake up. Come on.
And the other thing to remember is if you try to connect to that gateway, say it was Dan's gateway, Dan, yours isn't hybrid, right? Yours is just UHF.
It is not.
Yeah, and or like mine. And if it's not hybrid and it's UHF, VHF, and the internet's down, it will tell you before you when you try to send the message that it's not able to send it off to the CMS. Right. And give you the option to say, okay, I don't want to do that, right? And then knowing your ground presence about what the area that you're in looks like. If you're lucky, like we are in Southern California, and I try to hit Dan's gateway, I see it's down, he's in the donut hole too. I know, well, hopefully then I can hop into Roberts. And if I can hop into Roberts, I might even be able to hop all the way down to Tijuana, Mexico, XE2BC to get it out, internationally. And so hop through some UHF, VHF gateways to make that connection to ultimately get that message to the CMS. And the direct answer to the question that Francina asked is, where's the message stored when the recipient's also in the donut hole? If you get it out of your system and you can get it to a system that can connect to that CMS, it's going to be waiting in the mailbox, just like any other message that you send out. Mm-hmm. And when that individual who's also in the donut hole has the opportunity to check and make the connection, it'll pull down just like all of the other messages.
Right. And if the message is sitting and waiting on the gateway, when you connect to it, if you're connecting to the same one, it'll actually deliver the message, even if it doesn't have to go out to the CMS, which is kind of cool. What I've got up on screen now, and this is to figure out if the station that the gateway you're trying to connect to is a hybrid station. If you go to winlink.org, come up here in the top menu bar, click on Tools, and you scroll down just a little bit. This is going to have your map of all of the RMS gateways, and the controls for it are up here at the top. They're a little hard to see, but there's a little set of radio buttons. It defaults to packet. Let's come over here to VARA FM. I'll go ahead and select on that. This is going to show us all of the VARA FM gateways that are out there, and I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit tighter here, so we can pan around on the map. You'll notice as you look at the map here that in the pins, there's some that are just a green pin, and there's some that's a green pin with an H. And if it's
pulling it a little closer, Chris.
Pulling a little closer.
Yeah, still kind of small.
Trying to zoom. Oh, there we go. There's the zoomy zoom.
There you go.
Okay. So there's some of the pins that are just a green pin, like this one here. There's Dan's gateway, NR6V. And then there's other pins that have a little H in them. And if you, that one's AJ7-10. So if I click on that one, it's got the little H. That means it is a hybrid gateway. And you can see here in the comments section, it says comments, WinLink hybrid gateway. So this station, if you're able to send traffic through this station via VARA FM, then your traffic will automatically get forwarded via HF if there is no internet connection. You can see there's someone over here. There's one down here. So one of your options may be to try digipeating from where you're at, use some of the other stations that you've got. You can hop over and you can get your traffic to one of those hybrid gateways. You're going to need to know some of this kind of before you get in and know how to be able to do all of this. But and we've covered this in the several episodes where we talk about doing digipeating. This is one of the ways that you can do that. But if you've got HF, the world's your oyster. You can usually get your message out of the donut hole in and of yourself, all by yourself.
So Chris, I don't have the box for hybrid gateway checked. Why would I not want to do that?
If you don't have HF capabilities?
Well, no, I mean, it's on my HF gateway. Is there any reason I shouldn't check that box?
Not that I'm aware of.
I see Steve has his hand raised. Maybe he has a comment on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring Steve up. So let's ask him to unmute. And Steve, did you
while you're doing that, another question. I assume that if your hybrid gateway forwards it to another gateway and that gateway doesn't have internet, it would depend on the settings on that gateway as to whether it tries to forward it again or holds it for internet.
Yeah, there's more smarts in the system, so it would logically try and jump to another hybrid gateway or one that's got an internet connection.
Okay.
Yeah. Steve, I saw you came on for a brief second. You had your camera turned on, and then you disappeared on me.
I'm not there.
No,
Nope.
I don't see you.
We hear you.
I hear you. Go
Yeah,
ahead. What are you trying to say? There you are.
Okay, here's the deal. Hybrid only means that it also copies or is configured for radio only. That is totally without the internet, where you have to have a message pickup station as a user, at least one. The normal WinLink that where the radio message servers deal with email as well as to other WinLink users. Normal WinLink has an option. It's not called hybrid. It has an option that if you temporarily lose internet, it will alert the end user, who can either hang up or, if he's not in a hurry, put it there anyway. And then he can then that RMS, if so configured, can find an RMS that is connected via the internet to the common message server system, to the Amazon AWS, to the cloud, and forward that message to that RMS so that your message can be completed. But the word hybrid only refers to normal WinLink and radio only. So if you are on the amateur radio service, I would not recommend using a hybrid WinLink. I would recommend being able to allow your radio message server to forward to another radio message server if you lose internet temporarily. Does that clarify some things?
It is.
So the ability to forward by radio doesn't necessarily mean hybrid.
Exactly. Hybrid means that there are two systems separate. Radio only, which doesn't recognize that there is an internet, and then normal WinLink, which of course utilizes the internet. It bridges radio it bridges your messages over radio to either SMTP mail or other WinLink users via the internet.
So Steve,
That's normal WinLink.
So Steve, is there any other indicator in the map here on winlink.org that can tell whether or not a station has a gateway has forwarding turned on via HF?
I don't think so. No.
There's not. Okay.
If there's several options. If you look at the RMS relay, there are several options. One of the options is to hold the message until you get internet.
Right, and that's what we just walked. I'm not sure if you were here when we did the demo.
I just got here.
Yeah, we just walked through that demo, so that folks could see, and they were able to see the message that nothing was that there was no internet connection. We did the simulate internet outage. So this is the way that normally it would be set up. But not all HF gateways would have the operate as a part of the do the forwarding.
Well, the only thing that I can say is that when somebody begins to run a radio message server, I usually have a statement that I put in when I approve it as an RMS. I usually email that individual who has requested it, and I ask him to go to the WinLink Programs Group Reflector and gather some information about how he wants to operate, because there is a myriad of options available. Every time I turn around, Phil's got another option. So, the guy that does the map doesn't. I mean, nobody's really requested that he change the color or do anything else. I would say the standard default. And I don't know how it comes out now, but the standard default is usually hybrid. But it doesn't matter if it's hybrid, because so many people look at hybrid as what you guys were talking about, rather than it being radio only, and they don't have an MPS. Right. So when they get a message sent over radio only, it goes nowhere. It goes into the bucket.
Right. So, all right, cool. Thanks for that clarification.
Sure. So at the risk of going too far into the weeds, unless we're already there,
we're pretty far into the weeds.
Yeah, you're whacking them pretty good there.
Yeah. So my VHF UHF gateways are in a separate room on separate PCs, but are on the same LAN as my HF gateway.
As long as an RMS relay can integrate all of these together and more.
That's the question. So
how do you do that?
So if I've got no internet and a message comes in over my VHF gateway, I could set it up so that it would forward by HF.
Yeah, totally.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what you do, Dan, this definitely gets into the advanced settings, but here's RMS packet, and I don't have my RMS packet configured, but this is for VHF, UHF gateways. Let me go ahead and pull you guys down so folks can see.
This is a show
a little bit more. Yeah, this is a whole show.
I didn't comb my hair. I wasn't expecting that.
Sorry, Steve. You missed the demo that kind of explained what we were talking about. So Dan, here, if you check the box that says use RMS relay, because you can run a packet gateway or a VARA FM gateway without using relay. It'll just run within RMS packet. And that's the way that a lot of people do it. But if you check the box here that says use RMS relay, then RMS relay address, by default, it's set to localhost 127.0.0.1. It's meaning it's running all on that same computer. But if you change the address here to be the other machine on your network that is running relay, it will actually just move that message across your local network. It'll move it over to that other gateway, and out it'll go.
So is that the IP address of my HF gateway computer?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
On your local network.
And the proper port.
And the proper, yeah, you got to have ports open and all that. So it definitely gets into much more advanced stuff. But
okay, well, I'd like to do that at some point. Maybe I'll get some help.
Yeah, awesome. We will take that up because that is definitely a whole other show. All right, I'm gonna move away from this now, and we're gonna move on to the other ones, folks. If you're here in the Zoom and you do have questions, we'll do that during the after party. For most of those, I want to dive into the next question here that's up, and this one comes from KN6LOA. It says, how easy is it to go from voice to WinLink with the same radio? You give demos with net control. Do you have traffic to send? Do you do this actually with the same radio? What about the frequency? Absolutely great question there on that.
It depends.
Yes, it absolutely depends.
It absolutely depends. Let me bring the guys back up here.
There's at least one other factor, if not 50.
Yeah, Dan, David, you want to
go ahead, Dan. Do you start, Dan?
Well, the first consideration is the radio you're using.
Yeah.
Some of the radios, like the Yaesus that have a data port, are really easy because you can switch back and forth between voice and data simply by picking up the microphone and talking through it. Others, like I think some of the Kenwoods and Yaesus, or Kenwoods and ICOMs, it takes an internal setting change to switch between voice and data. And that gets pretty cumbersome. So my point was, it really depends on the radio. There are workarounds in Aries Northeast. A lot of the guys are going through the mic jack and putting a switch in between mic and data, so they don't have to deal with the internal settings. But it's totally dependent on the radio.
There's a whole bunch of factors involved. The radio is a huge factor, right? And also, where you're operating, the question isn't specifically clear UHF, VHF, or HF, right? Obviously in the HF world, you're not going to want to do voice on those frequencies where you're doing this. And yeah, you would have to switch it around. And UHF, VHF, a lot of times we do coordination. We'll move to another frequency and they'll do coordination. On the radios that I have in the house that I do my regular WinLink stuff on, it's dual send, dual receive. There's two sides of the radio. One of my truck works the same way. Now, the one of my truck allows me to lock in the data port to the left or the right side, and I usually leave the send on the other side of the radio, so I can talk sending on the other side. And if I send data, it automatically knows the packet to go out the other side of the radio, and I don't have to do a whole lot of switching back and forth. Now, the radio that I have in the house that has that same left side, right side functionality doesn't automatically switch. So when I go from transmitting, if I want to talk, sure, I could just pick up the mic and talk on the same side of the radio. But if we're coordinating on another frequency, I just push the other side to get it to the main to be able to talk back and forth. But there's a lot of other possibilities if it's just a single radio with a single frequency. If you're not coordinating on the same frequency, and as Dan mentioned, the Aries group here in Los Angeles in the Northeast, they don't use like the standard WinLink frequencies when they're doing drills or activations. They move somewhere else. It's in the digital area, and they do both voice and the digital coordination on the same frequency sometimes. And sometimes they'll have a secondary one to say, okay, if wait for it to clear and then send the traffic. There's a lot of factors in this. In terms of how to accomplish the question you're asking.
I would say,
and whether you need to do it or not depends a lot on the amount of traffic there is,
how many people are involved,
and how many people. If you've got 70 911 receiving hospitals like we have in LA, you're going to have somebody coordinating the digital traffic. And what we typically do is pick a simplex voice frequency, because the way I understand it is it's not wrong to do digital on a voice frequency, but it's wrong to do voice on a digital frequency. That may be different in different coordinators areas. So we usually pick a simplex voice frequency and have them, typically what they'll do is they'll have you check into the net. And when you check in, you'll say with traffic, if you have traffic, and they'll keep a list of that. And then they'll go back through the order and they'll say W6AH, go ahead with your traffic. And everybody stands by and lets Chris send his traffic. If it's really busy, as David said, they'll probably have a second frequency for digital traffic, but they still will probably want to coordinate it.
Yeah, or a third or a fourth if there's that many. If you got 71 hospitals reporting in, you may break it down geographically. Tell folks to go on low power, and if you get everybody down on low power, you can have two different stations pushing to two separate gateways if they're far enough apart without having much interference. But you have to understand how propagation works and what the areas you're in, and are the gateways set so that they're not blasting on high power, so that you're not overlapping or stepping on each other.
Now, David mentioned there's some of the VHF radios that have two sides to them. They've got dual receive, dual transmit. And so you can oftentimes set one side to be on your digital stuff and one side to be on your voice. And that's a great way to be able to go back and forth. On some radios, I know on the ICOMs, both the 9700, the 705, as well as the 7300, there is a setting when you go in and you set up for operating on digital. You can set where the radio is listening for input, and a lot of times it'll listen to the USB port or it'll listen to the data jack port. But there are also settings in there you can say where it will listen to both the data port, the USB port, and the microphone. So it allows you to do that back and forth very easily. You can also use the AB. Sometimes even with if your radio will do split, you can oftentimes have two sides of your radio, even with just an AB button, to be able to push and get that out. So there are lots of ways. Generally, what's happening is your net control operator, if you're on a directed net, is going to be not only monitoring the voice traffic that's going on, they may have a radio that's sitting there just monitoring on the digital frequency, so they can make sure that they're hearing that, okay, there's no traffic going on. And that's when they're saying, NR6V, go ahead with your traffic, because they've heard that calm that's gone on to be able to direct the traffic that's going there. So a lot of that is it kind of depends, but those are some scenarios. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that helps.
And that, we sort of assume that we have exclusive use, but we don't. Particularly here in LA, LA County, we've got probably 8 or 10 MCOM groups, and we all working off the same simplex frequencies. So as Chris said, it's really important that even though we have a net controller controlling our traffic, we make sure that the frequency's clear of other groups using it.
Yeah, and I would also say that with all of that congestion, one of the approaches that I'll oftentimes use is I'll bring a portable HF station, because then I'm hitting a gateway that's way outside of the area. I'm on frequencies that are not being congested by any of the local traffic that's going on. And then it allows you to be able to get your connections outside of the donut hole, outside of where all of that congestion is by that point. So great question. There's the form to be able to submit more questions. It's cq.wavetalkers.com/coffee bar. The next one comes in from KQ4KIO. They say, is there anyone that can help me with WinLink setup on a TYT TH900 radio? I can transmit telnet, but not RF. Many thanks. So,
I'm familiar. There isn't a TH900 that I know of. There's a 9000 and a 9800. I suspect he's talking about the 9000, which is a single band, very much like the Alinco 135 series. I use one of those for my 220 gateway. I have not been little bit of background. That radio has a header on the motherboard that has all the outputs for digital input. And there is, it even has in the case, it has a cutout for a DB9 connector. So it's set up really nicely to add a digital connection. The problem I've run into is I can't make it work. Most of the diagrams that are out there are either plain wrong, or they're looking for standard TNC connections, which are different than what you would use for a signal link or other board. So what I've done is I've gone in through the mic jack, and the connector is in the manual. Let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit, make it a little bigger. There we go. So that's the pin out, and you'd want to grab from that your mic ground, and your push to talk, and then you'd have to get your speaker from your speaker jack. And that's what I've done for my 220. It works great, but you're going to probably have to make your own cable. This appears to be different than most of the other radios in terms of the pin out. So you probably won't find a cable, pre-made cable. But I do that with a signal link and into the mic jack, and it works just fine. You just don't get the higher speed 9600 baud connection. But they're good little radios. They're cheap. They're about $150. They have them in 220, ham UHF and ham VHF. So
excellent.
That's the best I can give you on that.
All right.
But it is doable.
Let's go ahead and jump over to the question then. The next one comes in from KK6ZJC. They say, and this could be an entire series of, I'm going to bring the guys back up here because I'm sure you guys are going to have stuff that you're going to want to bring up about this particular one here. So the question is how to get people interested in amateur radio. How can we get younger children interested in it and get them away from the internet and phones? How can we get schools to allow us to show children what amateur radio can do? Some really good questions in here. The first comment that I would have as a thought for this is to get people involved and to meet them where they're at. So the first thing I wouldn't do is try to get them away from the internet and try and get them away from their phones. Like, pull them in. There's lots of ways that you can leverage the internet. They can leverage all of the same technology that's being used on the internet with their phones, and do that with amateur radio as well. If people start thinking about their phone, the number of radios that they have inside of their phone is absolutely just astronomical. You've got Wi-Fi radios for 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. You've got your Bluetooth radio. You've got your GPS radio that's in here. You also have the all of the different cellular radios for all the different frequencies that you're operating on with that. And interestingly enough, many of the phones, I'm going to go ahead and just bring myself back up here to full screen. Many of the phones, now I've got an iPhone, and if you look around the outside edges of your phone, you'll start to see little tiny bands, little breaks in the metal that goes around the outside of it. All of those are different antenna segments. And the way that your phone oftentimes is working on all of these different bands, all these different frequencies, because many of them are kind of spread out a little bit. Internally, they're changing which of those bands are connected. Those are your antennas. Many of them are off-center fed dipoles that are being able to radiate that signal out from different ways. There's so many things that you can take, and instead of pushing somebody into a particular area, pull them in with some of the things that they're interested in and help drive some of the topics to get them interested in that. Let me kick it over to Dan. Any thoughts from you on ways to get young people and others interested in amateur radio?
Well, I think definitely we've seen in our public outreach events that the younger people really like digital. They like the ability to do voicemail over radio. They like things like FT8. And so, showing them that, it's very hard to convince them that they're not going to be able to use their cell phone, and why they would want to do voice over RF. Yeah, so I think showing digital off, and which probably we've seen works pretty well for young people. And then as far as the schools, I don't have kids, so I'm not real familiar with working with the schools, but I think if you reach out to the STEM teachers, that's probably your inroad into schools, because I think they're always looking for ways to get their kids interested, and ham radio might be a solution for that.
Yeah. David, you got kids. What kind of thoughts do you have?
Just across all these questions, the bottom line is the way to get people, whether it's adults or children or whoever, interested in the program, is you have to have a compelling, put together presentation, offer, share. What you're offering needs to be interesting. It needs to be compelling. It needs to be, it needs to speak to them, right, in the proper manner. So you have to have it put together right. I've been doing Jamboree on the Air with the Scouts for a number of years, and my experience has been a lot of kids show up for the merit badge because it's just the way the program works. And if you have 40 kids show up and you have 2 that are really interested, they're your target. You got to serve all of them. You want to give all of them an opportunity to come and see and consume what you got and learn and do the merit badge. Those 2 other ones are the ones that you want to spend that extra time or divert them off to that right operator that you might have that can speak their language, can talk to the youth, can give them an opportunity to see more exciting, compelling stuff. And what I find is when we find that right one that's interested, some of the others will be like, oh, what's Jimmy doing? Oh, look at what Jimmy's doing. Isn't that cool what Jimmy's doing? And you might pull a couple others in. We did Jamboree on the Air last year, and there was one of the kids that was there that was just a little extra interested, and put him in front of the radio with Chris. And the first contact they made was like Eastern Europe, and it just sparked an interest. And he was already had some interest, but it really got him hooked and going. He sat in front of the radio for a long, long, long time. Much longer than if he just talked across the street or down the block or whatever. And it did it. And as far as getting in schools, it's getting more difficult to get in schools right now. There's a lot of concern about, just the unknown people coming into those environments. Dan's right. Hit the STEM programs. That's a great way to get in. And make yourself available, share what you can, offer to demonstrate what you want to talk about with the instructor before you just want to get in front of the kids. And that might be your gateway to get in. And just offer it, and don't drag anybody in that isn't interested. Don't push them all your time. If your spouse or your kids or whatever, if they're not interested, they're not interested. In my house, when we were at regular full occupancy and the kids aren't away in college or in the armed services or whatever, there's 7 people that live here. 6 of them are amateur radio operators. And 5 of those 6, well, actually all of them went willing. They all wanted to do it, and they all did it at their own pace. And they all take which parts of the hobby that they want. Some of them are more active and some of them are less active. You just got to give them the opportunities and let them do the things that they want to do.
Right on. And I'm sure we could go on for weeks on this particular topic. So
yeah,
great question. And I did see there were a couple of other questions that came in that got submitted here to cq.wavetalkers.com/coffee bar. And they're all very similar questions in the same vein of how to get other people involved with amateur radio. Let's go on to the next one. It says, do you use a USB cable or wireless to connect your IC 705? So I have an ICOM 705. This one came in from Terry Z01HOG in New Zealand. I have a 705, and for the most part, I connect it to my computer via USB. That's the most common way that I tend to operate my 705. And I've tried a variety of different cables in order to get the 705. That was always one of the challenges that I ran into with this. And the cable that I've tended to kind of lock into, if you have some of your own cables, let me bring up my main camera here so it's a little bit easier to see. This is a USB cable that came from DigiRig, and it's got the USB A on one side, and it's got the USB micro on the other side, and it's got a little ferrite bead installed on it. For the most part, most of the USB cables that I have tried, many of them will work. You just got to put a lot of ferrite beads on them. The length of the cable tends to make a big difference oftentimes for talking between the 705 and at least for the Windows tablet that I have. I've got the Surface Go 3 with that. I have 3 cables that work. One of which I don't have any ferrites on, and that works, but it generates a lot of interference a lot of times. It doesn't give good connections. This cable is the one from DigiRig, and this one works really well. This is the one that I primarily use with it. I have a third cable, and it's the first one that I started off with, and I have 3 ferrites on one side and 2 ferrites on the other side of that cable in order to make that one work. I have set up my 705 to work wirelessly with my Surface, but it's kind of a pain. As far as I'm concerned, it does work. It works really well. You just got to make sure that if that's the settings that you're using, that your computer is always set up to talk and your radio is set up to talk. I'd rather not use wireless while I'm out in the field because it's just one more thing that's draining battery power. So both out of my radio and out of my computer, to be able to put RF and push some of that energy out into the air, I'd rather conserve my battery a little bit longer in both devices and not use it for making a wireless connection. So hopefully that helps with that. And I know you guys don't have 705, so we'll move on to the next question. The next one says,
I will say that Triplite makes some USB cables that you can get on Amazon that come with ferrites, and several people have commented they work really well. It's TRIPPLITE. They mostly make UPSs and stuff, but people have said that these cables work really well.
And I'll say that the way that I connect my radio to my 705, I use one of these Anchor little dock cables. So it's got USB-C on the one side. That's what plugs into my Surface. It's got 2 USB-A ports on it. It's got some, chip readers in it. It's got a USB-C ports in it. It also has HDMI as well as an Ethernet connection. But in order to make this dongle work, you can see I've also added 4 little ferrite beads to this. I've got 3 set up here and then a little smaller one up here. All of these things tend to run into issues when you're connecting, at least for the Microsoft Surface. I found I have a real issue with this device in particular, having RFI issues with it. And so I find that I oftentimes have to go to lots and lots of ferrites. And if you're looking for where to get decent ferrites, the ones from
Palomar Engineering.
Palomar Engineering are excellent. They're kind of like the gold standard for if you're getting ferrites. So hopefully that helps. Let me jump back. Oh, go ahead. Anything else?
I was just gonna say I just put a choke that I bought from Palomar on my UHF gateway, because every time my HF gateway transmitted on 40 meters, a relay and my UHF gateway radio would oscillate, and I threw a choke on it and it solved the problem. So
it's amazing what those little things will do. Let's go to the next question. Next one comes up as how is Telnet peer-to-peer used? Dan, David, have either of you guys done any of the activities with the Northeast group when they've been using the Telnet peer-to-peer?
I have not.
You haven't? So the typical way that it's used, you can use this a lot via mesh. You can use it also via the internet to set up direct connections between two stations that are running WinLink to move data and do connections back and forth. The LAX Northeast group uses this quite a bit. Maybe what we'll do is we'll see if we can get one of those guys to come on to do some actual demos and really walk through how to be able to.
So I've done a bunch of it with them. It sets up. You can see my screen.
Yes.
It sets up. And again, about half of it's mesh and half of it's internet. And, I don't want to pick and show any. Well, actually, I could pick one of the mesh connections and show you what the setup looks like. It's pretty straightforward. You name what the station's called. You give it's the IP address, and this is using DNS to name it. You give it the port number that will port through, and it's as simple as that. You don't need a lot of other information or a lot of other detail. And it works just like Telnet, but you're going directly to a station. And as you said, the Northeast guys do quite a bit of that.
What are some of the things that they do with this, Dan? David?
Well, if you think about it, and you're doing it on mesh, and you have a mesh connection, when the internet's down, you can still make the connection through mesh, because mesh is your own kind of private or separate internet. It also gives you the opportunity, if you don't have an RF path, to get to another station that has an internet connection, but send it directly and not have to hop through the CMS if there's I don't know if there's a reason not to go to the CMS, but it gets you point to point, which is what the P2P is for.
Nice. All right.
I'm not sure why else you would do it other than that.
Yeah.
Because you can, because it's there.
Because you can. All right, there's the link again, cq.wavetalkers.com/coffee bar. That's the end of what I had prepared of those questions. So let me go back one, and I'm going to bring up the spreadsheet here in front of me. And let's see, guys, do you see any other ones that you want to kind of take on real quick that we don't have in the list?
I think there's a couple in there, but they're either like whole shows or like just specific to a single individual. It may or may not be the right topic to go. That's considering we've already done an hour and 15 on this.
Okay.
But up to you.
We can take some more of these. We'll move some of these into the after party as well to be able to do some of those. Let me jump back over to my PC. And David, can you pull you guys down real quick?
Yeah, sure, you got it.
And let's do the one more check to see of any other check-ins. I've been checking as we've been going along here to make sure that any of the check-ins have shown in, and it looks like I've gotten them all. So I'm going to come over here. Let's click on the map icon. And this is going to bring up, we're going to do the WinLink check-in V5. That's the new form, and new as in like several months ago. So if your check-in isn't showing up, it's a probably good thing to make sure that you're running the latest version of WinLink with the latest version of the forms. Let me click on display map. And if the demo gods are with me, there we go. It will show up. It looks like we're already zoomed here into the Southern California region. Why am I not seeing very many here? What's going on? 24 hours. Save. Let's go ahead and zoom out. We've got a couple of folks here. There's Logan, KD6LLB. N6HEG's also got their check-in. Let me go ahead and hit the zoom out button. And oh yeah, we've got check-ins that are kind of all over the place here. Can6LOA, several more out here in the Las Vegas area. Great to see you guys. Some more stations out here in the southern Utah area. Great to see you guys out there. and checking in here in Central Nevada, up here in the Southern Central California area. Roll over some of those up there. And up here into the California-Oregon border area. Let's zoom all the way out. Let's go to a full view of the world. And looks like we've got Terry joining us from New Zealand. Z1HOG, a station here, VK2SKY in Australia. Looks like maybe in the Sydney area. Hey, thanks a lot for joining us from there. This looks like Roland joining us from Germany. And let me come back over into the North America. I'll zoom in a little bit, hold down the right click and drag to pan the map. That's always super helpful. Victor Echo 3 Yankee X-Ray joining us from Canada. And I'm going to roll over these other stations down here in Florida, Georgia, and elsewhere throughout the country. We've got quite a few folks checking in all over the place. Station up here in Idaho. Roll over some of these here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the Pacific Northwest because there's quite a few stations that are kind of stacked up in here. It'll be a little bit easier to see them up here. Here we go. And several more. If you find the information that we're putting out there to be helpful, be sure to go onto the YouTube channel, like the video, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. Let us comments on the other videos as you're watching them, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. We are going to start cranking out some more shorter form content as well. And if you find the information really helpful, then consider going on to wavetalkers.com and use the link to buy us a coffee. It really helps support all of the infrastructure that it takes to keep the show and all of the Wave Talkers content up and going all the time. So, Dan, any closing thoughts from you this week as we wrap up another coffee bar?
No, I enjoyed it. I learned some stuff about gateways that I didn't know, and will be changing my configuration here soon. But I always think folks have great questions, and even though these coffee bars are relatively unstructured, they always tend to be some of the more interesting shows, I think.
Excellent. David, any closing thoughts from you this week?
Yeah. Again, what Dan said, these are always good. They're educational. It gives you guys all an opportunity out there to ask questions. We want to be of service to everyone out there. And so we're interested not only answering these kinds of questions, but bigger picture questions as well. As we create more content, we're interested in knowing more about, what you guys want to do in your amateur radio world, whether it's, more WinLink stuff or AMCOM or DX or, any of the other topics. If there are things that we can dive into and provide you some content, some training and education, that's what we're interested. So you all know how to email us or WinLink message us. So if you have ideas or if there's things you're interested in it, drop us a note and, tell us a little bit more about what you want to know about, the things you're interested in, and start a conversation with us. And who knows, down the road a little while, we may be able to help educate, you and your group or others as well. Because if you have that question, there's probably 2 or 3 or 10 other people that are joining us here that have the same question or interested in the same topic.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We'll be back again next week for another show. Thanks a lot. And we'll say 7-3 to everyone on the live stream. If you're here inside of the Zoom, hang around for the after party where we'll unmute the mics and let everybody ask your questions directly to us. And until then, we'll say 7-3. See you next week.
7-3 all.